to Adjusted Reality, a podcast series trusted by the adjusted and brought to you by the Foundation for Chiropractic Progress, where we learn from athletes, celebrities, influencers, and healthcare professionals about how to optimize health in a fun, relatable way. Join me, Dr. Sherry McAllister, as I speak to Dr. Chris Niebauer about the thinking mind, his take on modern philosophy, and how the brain imbalances affect body imbalances. Dr. Chris Niebauer earned his Ph.D. in cognitive neuropsychology at the University of Toledo, specializing in the differences between the left and right sides of the human brain. He is currently a professor at Slippery Rock University in Pennsylvania, where he teaches courses on consciousness, mindfulness, left and right brain differences, and artificial intelligence. Dr. Chris Niebauer became aware of the Buddhist neuroscience connection as a student, noting it's practically its own genre in the bookstore. And according to Dr. Niebauer, we are just beginning to understand the link between Eastern philosophy and the latest findings in psychology and neuroscience, and what these assimilated ideas mean for the human experience. He is the author of No Self, No Problem: How Neuropsychology is Catching Up to Buddhism. In this groundbreaking book, Niebauer writes that our sense of self, or what we commonly refer to as the ego, is an illusion created entirely by the left brain. And what makes this book unique is that Niebauer offers a series of exercises to allow the reader to experience this truth for themselves, as well as additional tools and practices to use after reading the book, all of which are designed to change the way we experience the world, a way that is based on being rather than thinking. We are absolutely delighted to have you on Adjusted Reality. Congratulations on your book. It was an outstanding read for me and how I thought about the brain as a whole, as well as the sum of its parts.
Thanks for having me here. It's great to be here.
There's so much to cover in so little time, so we want to jump right in because your book actually did change the way I looked at things, and therefore the way I look at things started to change. So let's start with, in your book, you discuss the origins of thinking mind. Can you kind of give us an overview for our listeners? What does that mean and how does it impact them?
That's a great question. And it's one that it so often just doesn't get asked, I think, as much as it should, because we all are on this quest. You know, who am I? I want to figure this human situation out. I want to know who I am. And we start off with almost an amnesia about our species and our place on the planet. And we go back. It's a fascinating journey that humans have been on the planet for about 2.5 million years. And then our version, Homo sapiens, we're really new. And we kind of like we own this place, but we're really, we've just moved in recently. And we've only been on the planet, Homo sapiens have been on the planet about 200, maybe 300,000 years. And we shared the planet with all kinds of different species of humans. I mean, there's Homo erectus and Neanderthal and at least 6 different types of humans. And we were all, in our version, Homo sapiens, we're kind of insignificant. And then about 70,000 years ago, something clicked and no one really knows what happened. But we got this giant thinking boost. We got this thinking mind that helped us strategize, and we could outwit our competitors. And that's one of the reasons that we're here, and the rest of these different versions of humans, they're extinct. We literally outthought them. And it was a whole bag of cognitive tricks. It was our ability to categorize. It was our ability to be strategic. It was our ability to create a sense of self that we would protect. And so we had all kinds of tricks that our competitors didn't have. We have to remember this is 70,000 years ago. And while we won that competition, we're all stuck with that same neurological program in our skull. But look at the world around you. Everything has changed. We're not dealing with an ice age. We're not dealing with, walking down the street and thinking that something's going to eat me. And so everything you could possibly imagine about our world is different. But our thinking machinery is stuck in that world of 70,000 years ago. It's using the same tricks that got us to survive to this point. And so I have a book coming out in early next year, and it's all about, I call this Mind 1.0. And I call it Mind 1.0 because it's a 70,000-year-old program that we all have stuck in our skulls, and it's never been updated. So imagine, we've got computers, and imagine just going for a short time without updating your software. Imagine going 70,000 years without updating your software.
That is one old computer.
It's old, it's outdated, and yet at the same time, we're relying on that old, outdated program to get us through our life and to solve our problems. Mm-hmm. And our problems have changed. They're different problems. They're in desperate need of an update. And so what I try to do is, the first step in this is to recognize the program. And so most of the thinking that we do, and one big trick with this program was language. And so people don't really think about language as being really the first wireless transmission of information. And so it's really a very cool trick. Like I can just say these words and they're just ripples in the air, but they go across the waves, and all of a sudden you have the idea in your head that I had 5 seconds ago. Mm-hmm. And so we have this amazing ability to communicate our ideas through language. But now we are stuck with the program in a dominant position. In other words, and I talk about this a lot in the book, that this thinking mind, this Mind 1.0, it's a fantastic tool. But you have to question if you're using the tool or is it using you? Mm. And so everything got flipped. And for most of us that are stressed out, most of us that are living in what seems to be such a problematic world of anxiety and depression, which again, if you look over the last 50 years, anxiety and depression just seem like they're escalating at totally unprecedented levels. And why? Why is this happening? And I think it has to do with the mind and our reliance upon this really outdated program and its desperate need for an update. And the first step in that is to start recognizing the program and recognizing it's not who you are. And that's the first step. It's a great place to start. And you recognize it by simply, you can recognize it by becoming more familiar with the research in psychology. Psychology has done a great job mapping out the mind and its faults. And that's why I start off in the book, I start off with the split brain patients, because we've just amazing discovery that in the 70s, they took a group of patients and literally split the brain in two. They had two completely independent hemispheres. But the most fascinating thing about the split brain patients is that for the first time, we were able to look at the isolated left and the isolated right brain. And what they discovered is that the left brain had this remarkable talent to confabulate. It made up stories, and it believed in these stories, and it did it so effortlessly, like literally, like that's the program. That's what this brain program, it was made to interpret reality and make up a story about it. The problem is that these stories are so often simply not true. And so as a species, we have to recognize that a lot of the stuff going on in your skull, the stories, the inner talk, the interpretations that you make, and it could be something simple as walking down the hallway and someone's laughing, and then you hear this voice in your head saying, oh, well, why are they laughing at me? And so often it has nothing to do with you. They were looking at their phone, and it's just something they were amused with. And so in recognizing the program, we have to recognize its amazing capacity to make up stories and how often these stories are just simply not true. I I do a practice with my students. I say, okay, it's 2021, and when was the last time you were wrong? And I see them kind of look like, okay, well, I haven't been wrong at all this month, and I haven't been wrong, So 2020, I'm pretty clean and so far in 2021. I don't think I've been wrong at all. And we start joking about it because it's like that's part of the program. The program was made to always assume it was right, and it's a really important part of our evolution to recognize the program, recognize that it's outdated, and recognize how often we actually are wrong.
Right.
And
I mean, wrong,
yeah.
but you're right. You said a few things that were really helpful for kind of getting an idea of what you're really talking about, which is if the mind really is a tool, the question is, do you use the tool or does the tool use you? And you just opened up a whole way of looking at this lump of mass that sits on the top of our shoulders called our mind. And that you had in your book a quote from Hudson Smith that says, the brain breathes the mind like the lungs breathe air. And it took me moments to just really kind of understand that as a chiropractor, trying to really spatially put it together. How does that actually work? And then you talked about our egos not being wrong, because the first thing we all want to be is right. And sometimes even when we're wrong, we keep telling ourselves these lies, that left brain taking over. And as we kind of look back to relating to our sense of self, otherwise known as our ego, can you share more about how do we deal with this left brain sense of self versus where we are right now? Because you're right, as you're walking down the hallway, all of a sudden someone starts to laugh and you think they're laughing at you, and you're looking at it, is my zipper down? Do I have toilet paper stuck to my foot? And that is just a human experience right there. So share with us a little deeper in there about that topic.
Yeah. So imagine that, you go to sleep and you're laying in bed and everything is fine physically. Physically, you're healthy, the bed's comfortable, there really isn't a problem in the world. And then all of a sudden the mind starts doing its thing. And that's how it just breeds these thoughts, and it starts coming. And all the thoughts, the vast majority of them are I thoughts, me thoughts. Like, did that email I sent today, is that going to get me fired? And so one of the things you can do is you're laying in bed and the I program starts playing, is to recognize how often these thoughts are I-centered thoughts, and start to almost do a journal. So for a lot of people, journaling has been super helpful. And you can start keeping a journal of how often these I thoughts are wrong. And you can recognize that these things that we stayed up all night for, it didn't turn out the way we thought it would. And so that email that you thought was going to get you fired, you go in the next day and your boss thought it was a funny joke, and so you stayed up all night for nothing.
Right.
Now, that's the start of it, because some of us, we do recognize that. We recognize that, oh, I worried for nothing. Some medical tests were out, and I couldn't sleep, and then they turned out to be fine. And so we do recognize that. But I think a really important thing about the program is that so many of the stories we're telling are centered on the I. They're centered on me. I mean, when's the last time you stayed up all night worrying about someone else's problem?
Excellent point. It does bring you back to how we fabricate. And I think you did a fantastic job of really going through the left and right brain. And there's the left brain really tries to kind of categorize, and it's constantly analyzing our thoughts. And it's a me moment. Mm-hmm. And it would be interesting, actually, as I think and sit here now thinking about, could I reflect on thinking about someone else and someone else's problems? It's a very good exercise in and of itself. As you've been kind of developing the understanding of from a student being involved in the neuroscience. There's a modern philosophy which really has shaped our sense of self. Can you kind of, in your mind, share with us in what ways do you see that modern philosophy has shaped our sense of self?
It's a combination of philosophy and our culture. And so we were not born with this sense of self. And that's the wonderful thing about being with the newborn. If you're just with an infant and they're so in the present moment and there's just such a natural flow of emotions, they have joy and then they're unhappy, then they're joyful. And then, and it's just this beautiful flow with no overthinking. And then something happened to us about 2 or 3 years, and that's when we started picking up language. And I think it's really interesting that Helen Keller, people might be familiar with that. She, had a really dramatic loss of her senses, and so she didn't really have language until later in life. And she said she never really had a thought of me or I until she had language.
Hmm.
And once she started to be able to speak and then, form these, and that's what language is. Language is this abstraction, it's symbols. Once she got good at that, then all of a sudden a self appeared. And so our culture, it's not necessarily, if you look at cultures around the world, this isn't true across the globe, but our culture in particular tends to emphasize the self. We tend to cultivate it. We tend to, if you remember, even when you were kids, it was always, what are you going to do in school? Where are you going to study? What are your beliefs? Then 20 years later, we've got this really problematic idea in our head about a self, and it just didn't pop up out of nowhere. It's the end result of a culture. And again, this is where it becomes very useful to contrast the Western culture with the East, and they are quite different in this respect. But now it's really a world culture, so we're all kind of caught up into cultivating the me, I, and ego. Most of the planet now,
Mm-hmm.
but there's our real nature was before I. Our real nature, so the I came on, later in life, and so it's almost like a set of philosophical assumptions, and it goes back philosophically, I think, to Descartes.
Mm-hmm.
Descartes was really the person who's probably one of the most influential philosophers in the West. But he had his famous statement, I think, therefore I am. And that so summarizes our Western philosophy, that it's my thoughts. It's the mind program that thinks and strategizes and tries to figure out patterns, and it tries to predict the future, and it tries to learn from the past. It's all caught up in that survival program that us in the West, we think that defines us. Literally, he came right out and said it. I think, therefore I am.
Right.
And we neglected all the other components to our human experience. And there's all kinds of other things that, all kinds of other conscious states that we can process and experience, and are actually part of our totality of what it means to be human. And it ranges from simple body awareness to music to dance. And there's a whole world out there that's beyond what we think. And so in the book, I try to encourage people to explore these other conscious realities, because the human experience is so much more than what we think it is. The thoughts are just this tiny little component to what it is to be human, but they don't define us.
Right. I like how you really structured the ability to create more in your life by not defining yourself to this one spot. This is what I think, and therefore I am, because it is much more than that. Let's go back to health, and let's talk about our body as a vessel. And much like the left and right brain, we start talking about the lying left interpreter brain, and the right, that kind of open experience. We're spatially here, we're consciously aware, to how the thinking mind affects our body and possibly even our health as we know it.
Well, remember, this Mind 1.0 program is old, it's outdated, and it was always trying to protect us from something that was dangerous. So it was in that fight or flight mode. So many of us, we have that sympathetic arousal we're always in fight or flight mode.
That's called standing in line at Starbucks.
Yeah. It is, and it's fascinating too, because you can see, like, you could be standing in line and if someone cuts in front of you, you can feel that program. People
Right.
can get very upset if someone just simply cuts in front of you. And again, that's part of the old program. The old program was there. It was like, you really were in line to get a resource that was you desperately needed, not Starbucks. But the old program is still kicking in. One of the wonderful things about the right brain is that the right brain is so much more in the present moment. It's not worried about competition. It's not worried about your future self or controlling the world. And Ian McGilchrist, he also talks about the left and right sides of the brain. He makes a wonderful point about how, we're cross-wired. So the left brain controls the right hand and the right brain controls the left hand, but most of the world, we're right-handers. And we use that right hand to go out and control and manipulate and change the world into what we think is a better version of it. And there's nothing wrong with that, but we're kind of stuck in that, what can I do next? And then the only reason you do something next is if something's wrong right now. The wonderful thing about right brain awareness is that it's so much more in the present moment. And it's so much more connected with your body as you're experiencing it right now. And that's why you'll find one of the simplest versions of meditation is a body scan. And in a body scan, you simply become aware of your body. And that sounds funny. People are like, well, of course I'm aware of it. But most people are absolutely not aware of their body. They're so caught up in thinking and abstractions and trying to predict the future and in the survival mode that they totally lost touch with what's going on. And even in terms of very simple sensations. So I was just teaching my mindfulness class, and we'll take a moment, and I'm like, let's just take a second and let's become aware of our feet. Let's just become conscious of our, and sometimes they think it's silly, but all of a sudden they become conscious of their feet. And the wonderful thing about that sensation is when we get into body consciousness, you're not thinking. You're not trying to do anything. You're not trying to achieve anything. You're not trying to, it's not competition. You're not changing or manipulating. You're just becoming aware. So it's a wonderful place to exist and take a break from thinking.
I like that you said it just so eloquently, because I think as a patient goes face down on a chiropractic table, as I reflect on it, that's exactly where you are. You're allowing that whole experience to be, I'm here now. And maybe even at some point, the soft trigger point that you didn't have any idea existed. And all of a sudden you're like, oh, wow, how about that? I didn't even know that pain point existed. Explain to me how you see the body relating to the mind on a physical reality. So you talked about, the ability to really be in touch and then stop and be present and thinking about your feet. Fight or flight, that left brain, that kicking in of the archaic system has physical ramifications. The heart starts to beat quickly. And there's a balance to life because you can't always be in that fight mode. And that right brain, can there actually be a balance? I know there's yin and yang. Can there be a balance of the right and left brain in today's society?
I was just talking with Joe Bolte-Taylor. We just did a chat on Saturday, and that was the question. It was, really bringing that discussion back to popularity, the balance between the left and right. And again, sometimes when I talk about thinking, people get the idea just like, well, let's just end thinking is a bad thing. And I really don't want to emphasize it or even hint that thinking is bad. There's nothing wrong with thinking. It's just a tool. And, in the same way, like if I tried to use a hammer as a pillow, it's not going to work. And so, to bring balance back, we need to explore some of these right brain states, these bodily conscious states where we're not thinking. And the interesting thing about this, when we find some balance, and people, this is one of the things that happen when people do this shift from left brain, me, I, everything is about my problems. And then they turn that down just a little bit and they become more aware of their breath, which is super important. And they become more aware of their body. And they realize that there's no problems in the body. I mean, sometimes it's true. People may have pain. They may need an adjustment, but you know, there's no intellectual problem to be solved. And so I always say you can't solve a thinking problem with more thinking.
Well
But
said.
but that's the state so many of us are caught up in. We think we can think our way out, and then people start exploring yoga, and they start exploring these and Tai Chi and meditation and mindfulness. And all of a sudden they realize you can't think your way out of a thinking problem. That's not the solution. You get out of thinking altogether and the problem goes away on its own. And so if you're doing yoga the right way, you have no problems while you're doing yoga.
Oh, I love it. I totally agree with you. Having a sister that is a yoga instructor, it's Sherry, stop thinking, just allow yourself to do. In that, it's almost like a Nike commercial, right? It goes to just doing it rather than thinking through it. Very powerful. So I'm sensing you have some practical ways that maybe 1, 2, or 3 ways you could share with our audience as we begin to now really understand that the left brain has one potential opportunity and the right brain has another. And as we start to create this incredible balance, stability, mobility, flexibility, all of the things that really make us who we are on the physical well-being, the brain has to do a very similar part with the mind and how it's coordinating this archaic tool that needs some shift to go from the old operating system to the new, which I'm going to be sitting on the edge of my seat till that next book comes out, because you're going to be right back here with me and we're going to share with our audience what that next step is. But can you share 3 practical ways that our adjusted reality listeners can think about in regards to turning their mind into a balanced body?
Sure. So there are all kinds of doors you can get into, you can open up to get into right brain awareness. And the fascinating thing about it is that once you open one, other doors become open. And so it doesn't really, they say there's a lot of paths up to the top of the mountain, and they may be different, but they all go to the same place. And so one of the things I really encourage with people is I say, find something that the right brain excels at and start doing it. Don't think about it, just do it. And so music is one of the simplest and easiest ways to get into right brain awareness. There's a group of people who had a stroke in their left brain, and they totally lost the ability to speak. So they literally they cannot communicate, which is super important in our language or in our culture. But they can sing, and they can sing because the right brain does music. And so they totally changed the way that they do therapy with these patients. They used to just try to force it. They try to force them to, articulate a word and speak, and it wasn't working. And then they said, well, let's just use the talents that they still have that are functioning. And as soon as they started singing, they actually have choirs of patients with left brain damage. None of them can talk, but they can all sing.
Oh, that's wonderful and amazing.
It is. It's incredible. And so I encourage people, find your art. It's there. Your art is there, and maybe it's music, maybe it's dance, maybe it is yoga. Find something in your life. It doesn't have to be for a long. It doesn't have. Sometimes people get caught up in this idea. Well, I have to sell my sports car and I have to live on the side of a mountain. And I'm like, no, that's not the message.
Right.
Keep your sports car. It's fine. Keep your sports car. And but find even 5 minutes a day. Find just a little bit of time every day and maybe it's breathing, but it has to be something where you're not thinking. It has to be something where the goal is not in the future, the goal, it's play. So when um, when I talk about the left and right sides of the brain, people always say, well, tell me the short version. How does the left and right side of the brain differ? I have answered this question in countless ways. I'm always changing my answer to it. But my more current one is that the left brain is very serious. And it's a very serious kind of, this is a really, we need to do this. And there's times that there, with a schedule to keep. And so that creates so much stress in the body.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a wonderful saying that, you know, you're never too old to have a happy childhood. And so find your play, find something that you like to do for no reason. It has nothing to do with making you a better person. It is absolutely play. And when you find that non-serious play, and sometimes that's music. Sometimes, you listen to music. We don't listen to music for a reason. I don't listen to it to improve myself. I'm doing it for fun. And our culture has lost touch with play. We look at play as like, well, why are you playing? What's the purpose of play? And of course, play has no purpose. That's what play
That's
is.
right. That's the whole purpose. When we were kids, we never looked at our watch and go, oh boy, we're under this huge time frame to get all of the playing in right now.
Yeah. Well, I need to, it just came natural to us.
Right.
And people, adults looked at play and they tried to figure it out. And so scientists, they're developmental psychologists who tried to figure out why children play, and they couldn't do it because there is no reason why they do it. They play for its own intrinsic value. And so on your path, it's really valuable if you can find your play. If you can find something that you do for no reason, it's fun. And you'll find yourself kind of, I do anyway, I find myself kind of laughing a lot through it. And that's something that we came into the world with. And I think, and again, it's a little bit more kind of nature of the universe kind of thing, but I think that our existence it's fundamentally in play. It's in play, it's in humor, it's not to be taken very seriously. And it's okay to turn the serious thing on once in a while if you're at work and something's due. Go ahead and be serious for a little bit. But find your play. Find your play. And I think you'll find a lot of the play in music, in art. You'll find it's not going to be language. It's probably going to be something else. And so I have students sometimes try a drum circle. I don't know if people have tried this. It's also a great way to get out of the thinking mind because, the thinking mind just says, oh, this is so silly. And, I'm just going to sit around and everyone just sort of, finds a rhythm. And then all of a sudden, something happens. The thinking mind turns down and it becomes fun. And you're playing again. And you're finding your inner child. And it's something that culturally we haven't expressed very much. And I think another thing that people can explore is, again, we're so dominated by the thinking mind, but it's important to remember that our species, well, not just our species, but all life on Earth, we were creatures of feeling 600 million years before we started thinking. And once we started thinking, then thinking took over, and thinking sort of hijacks our feelings. But once you can turn the thinking mind down a little bit, what you have is a wonderful sense of feeling, very similar to how an infant, those emotions are just very natural, and you can feel wonderful states. It's almost like joy becomes a dominant mode of our feeling. And we've kind of taken the seriousness of the thinking mind and we've hijacked all that joy and we've turned it into stress and worry. But it's there. It's there. It's ever present. All you have to do is find some ways to get out of the thinking process. And you can do that with music. You can do it with yoga. You can actually do it with anything. So next time you go for a walk, and I had a wonderful experience with this. So I was doing my typical walk where I had my music on and I was listening to probably a podcast, thinking and I stopped thinking on my walk. And I started appreciating my sensations. And all of a sudden I heard this wonderful music from the birds. There were birds all over the place singing these wonderful songs. And it was just blew me away that they were there singing all the time. I just never listened to them. And so that joy is, it's always there. All we have to do is turn down the thinking mind a little bit, get back into my favorite philosopher, Alan Watts, had a great way of putting it. He said, if you think all the time, all you think about are thoughts, and you live in a world of illusion. And so
That's awesome. It really is.
We need to lose our mind. I know that sounds funny, but lose your mind once a day. Lose it.
As soon as you lose your mind, you start to actually smile and start laughing. Like as soon as you said it to me, it's like, that would be refreshing, because you're right. So many things in our world are all about thinking. I'm thinking about the past, how it reflects for the future. How do we move the present into the future and make sure that we're putting all the pieces in place? And I think as I hear you speak, is our audience really does need to just be childlike, even if it was go find a baby and watch them and be mindful and listen to the birds singing and create that reality where you turn that left brain into relax mode and turn that right brain into enjoy and find true enjoyment in what we're doing. So you have done an excellent job at preparing the mind-body balance for our listeners and creating now the next step to when you come back with that book that's coming out soon, and showcasing where audience is currently right now, that's going to find the joy and the playfulness and the just ability to create more balance in their life, to then taking that old archaic system for that next book that you've got and showcasing what are the next steps from there. I am really pleased to have you on our podcast today, Dr. Niebauer. It's been a true pleasure, and I look forward to having you back.
It was great being here. It was a great conversation. I really enjoyed it. And I hope your listeners, if they get one thing out of it, just play a little bit today, have a little bit of fun. And find your inner child who wants to play desperately, but you've been like putting them to bed early and making them do homework. And they're not here to do homework; they're here to play.
Thank you for tuning in to The Adjusted Reality, as we spoke to Dr. Chris Niebauer about the thinking mind, modern philosophy, and how imbalances within our mind can affect our body. For us to be truly healthy, we need a balanced mind and a balanced body. The takeaway today: play. Stop thinking and start playing. Whatever stops you from thinking, that's where you're going to find your greatest enjoyment. It's in the play. So have playtime. How fun is that? Play more each day. This podcast was brought to you by the Foundation for Chiropractic Progress. As a special gift for listening today, visit f4cp.org/health to get a copy of our Mind, Body, Spirit ebook, which focuses on many ways to optimize your health and the ones you love without the use of drugs or surgery. Don't forget to subscribe, share this podcast with family and friends, rate and review. If you're feeling inspired to learn more about chiropractic or to find a doctor of chiropractic near you, visit f4cp.org/find-a-doctor. We appreciate your support and look forward to checking in with you again soon.